Songpola. My name is Songtashi, and I'm currently serving as the Executive Director of the Lopen Foundation. On behalf of the Lopen team, I would like to welcome all of you gathered here and those participating online for a landmark session of the Bhutan Dialogues, the 50th session. I would also like to extend our gratitude to the Tharayana Foundation for hosting the event and thank all who participated in the 49 other sessions since we started the first Bhutan Dialogue with the first session on 12th October 2017. Bhutan Dialogues was conceived and launched in collaboration with the United Nations in Bhutan with the objective of creating a forum for civil conversations, mindful listening, right speech, in-depth discussions, and cordial debates. It is an attempt to put into practice the priceless ancient Bhutanese advice that the deliberation of 3 average brains is better than the idea of a lone brilliant brain. Ironically, we have 3 brains, our 3 speakers today, but these brains are far from average. So we can look forward to gaining many pearls of wisdom from our 3 speakers. The talk host will be delving into the intelligence, experience, and knowledge of our speakers to inform us on how they think we can help our transformation through public discourse. Today's conversation topic is asking us a question. How can we help our transformation through public discourse? But the question within this question is, what is the transformation we are referring to? The outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has caused unprecedented turbulence in countries all over the globe. In Bhutan, the thriving tourism industry was the first to fall, with around 2,400 visa cancellations when the country closed to inbound tourists on March 6, 2020. And with it fell the hotel and allied industries, resulting in the closure of hotels and many other businesses which cater to tourists. The pandemic has caused serious disruptions in all other areas, calling for private and public actors to reflect, review, and change course to adapt to the new normal. The Bhutanese must get ourselves ready for change, and the changes are already underway in areas ranging from tourism policies to national level civil service reform. As the winds of change are blowing stronger than ever, both at home and abroad, there is no better time to have a discourse on these economic and socio-political transformations than today. Allow me the pleasure and the honor of introducing our panelists, Siok and Pek-Dorji, Mr Yeshey Dorji, and Mr. Kumar Poudel. Pek is the founder and now the advisor to the Bhutan Center for Media and Democracy. She has dedicated over a decade to the mission of nurturing democracy in Bhutan through civic engagement, public discourse, and media literacy. Mr. Yeshey Dorji is a professional photographer. He began his career in the Bank of Bhutan and then joined the Ministry of Trade and Industries, where he headed the export division. After serving as a civil servant for 17 years, he became a pioneering tech entrepreneur. He is currently a charter member and the secretary of the Rotary Club of Thimphu, as well as a member of the Advisory Council and the Bhutan Foundation. And our youngest panelist, Mr. Kumar, is a youth leader, a recent graduate from Royal Thimphu College. He is currently serving as the country ambassador at the Global Peace Chain of the United Nations. He is also the vice chairperson of the G17 University Ambassadors Consortium, Bhutan chapter under G17 UAC Global. And our host is Dr. Karma Phuntsho. He is the founder of the Lopen Foundation and currently sits on Lopen's Board of Trustees. He is a spiritual thought leader, Buddhist teacher, and the writer in digital residence for the Buddha Nature Project at the Sadra Foundation. Before I invite our panelists to start today's important conversation, some house rules. I would like to request everyone to keep your phones on silent. There will be a question and answer session afterwards, and I would like to request that the questions to the panel be kept short and to the point, in the interest of allowing time for more questions and for in-depth responses, rendering the question and answer session a meaningful exchange. Our online viewers may drop their questions in the chat box. The Bhutan Dialogues team will compile the questions and read them out during the question and answer session. Dashidelek, and thank you. The floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you, Amchong. So welcome to the 50th session of Bhutan Dialogues. In fact, 51st session if we count our website launch session as well. And now when we talk about societal transformation, one thing that Bhutan Dialogues believed in is societal transformation can only happen with proper individual human transformation, with human personal capacity development. And one area where we really need to develop the capacity is to help people broaden their boundaries of thought, to help people have a different perspective on the issues. So through carrying out dialogues with this, our hope was to help the citizens of Bhutan, particularly the youth, to grow intellectually, and then through the discussions also to inform their policies and decisions by carrying out more rigorous, in-depth discussions with the experts and the decision makers. So it's a great honor for us to have three of you today, and also a privilege actually to have our first session hosted by a civil society organization. I think I'll begin with Pek, ladies first. So as we look at the process of transformation that Bhutan has been going through, and I often talk about how Bhutan is in a transition as an academic, economically moving from a subsistence farming community to now a sort of capitalist consumerist economy, moving from a largely oral society to an audiovisual society, almost skipping the literary phase, moving from an entirely rural community also to a very big urban settlement now, and also socio-culturally. We've come from being a very hermetic, isolated kingdom to be a full member of the globalized community. We have come from a nature-oriented, pre-Buddhist and mind-centered Buddhist cultural ethos to move into a secular scientific worldview. But even beyond these changes happening in the last 50, 60 years, we are seeing dramatic changes and transformations happening right now. So when you look at these processes, what is your take? Do you feel very anxious about them, unsettled about the future, or are you so happy and pleased that these changes are happening?
Thank you very much, and I'm really pleased to be here for the 50th conversation. So I guess when you ask me that question, you've already laid out the dramatic changes that Bhutan has been through. And I feel that in all my years in Bhutan, I've been living in constant change. So although right now the changes seem to be a lot more compressed, perhaps we are living in digital times where information or disinformation and misinformation spread so quickly. But otherwise, change has always been there. And I kind of feel like while there is some anxiety, there's also a lot of possibilities. And I feel that it's also our perspective, how we look at things. Do we look at life as a glass half full or a glass half empty? People who like to be in control, those of us who are, sort of like very happy with the way things are, find change very difficult. But people who are optimistic might say, hey, here's our chance. Post-COVID and with climate change, the UN, I've been reading a lot of very depressing stuff. The UN says half the world's population is in a danger zone, right? I live in a period where I can switch on a war, and when I've had enough and it's dinner time, I have to fix the salad, I switch off the war. So these are very difficult times, and the kind of narratives that are spinning around tend to be a little negative. But I feel that for us in Bhutan, I've seen the resilience of a country that has been very different. And I think there are a lot of opportunities, Of course, there's some things, you're a little fearful. You say, oh, what's going to happen? Too many cars on the road. You were just chatting. How can that be? Are we going to make an effort to stop climate change? Are we going to stop junk food? Of course, these things concern us. We get a little anxious and aggravated sometimes, but I think now of all times, is the time for change.
So, Lavishi, you have also lived through most of these changes. You have worked as part of public institutions, then you are now a private individual, and above all, I think you have been very conscious about the changes, very aware, and writing a lot, running your blog, which is read by, I think, quite a lot of Bhutanese and perhaps also a lot of people abroad. So when you look at Bhutan's situation, is the glass half empty, half full, or is it going to get sort of fuller? What is your take?
Thank you. Frankly, my point of view is that Bhutan today is going through a transformation. And from my point of view, what I see is the transformation is happening in isolation of the past. I think there's no continuity in the transformation that we're talking about. And I somehow feel that is a little bit dangerous, because I think you cannot disconnect yourself so abruptly. For instance, regarding change, there has been a whole lot of changes. But somehow, I don't know. I'm personally not very happy with the changes that's happening. I think some changes are too drastic. Like I blogged on one issue about the change, is that the change must come, not abruptly. It has to be introduced slowly so that the people at large can absorb it. Here, the change, I think, is happening too abruptly, and people are a little caught off guard. I think that's not a very happy situation.
But sometimes shock therapies work, right?
To the point that you get numbed.
Well, let's move to our youngest panelists. So, Yam, you've just graduated from RTC. Congratulations. Now, as you enter the real life, as we call it, now the post-education life, and try to get into the job market, how do you see Bhutan's current situation? As full of challenges and so difficult for you, or you feel so privileged and honored to be part of Bhutan at this time of the history, and not just you, your colleagues as well? What do young people think of current Bhutan?
Well, thank you so much, sir, for congratulating me and my batch of friends who recently graduated. I only take this as a part of my schooling and not just consider it as something that I come into a real world. As I experienced my college life and recently graduated along with my friends who are almost around, which approximates to around 20,000 youth. And I'm excited to be part of those youth who are recently now into the job market and want to be are competing to be employed in some organizations. And from a very young age, I feel that the system in Bhutan has developed us in a way that we look upon someone and then we try to be that one. So for me, I think it's really something that I am interested to be. And as sir, you mentioned that my future plans or things that I want to do, I am interested in. So from a young age, I have always seen myself among the group of people who report on various issues. For instance, our journalist friend in the country, they have been a medium who entertain, educate, and then inform our citizens. And I look forward to be one among the various list of journalists in the country. And let me not forget to also talk about some of the challenges, or as I mentioned, let me also speak of some of the things that really makes me think a lot, is regarding how our youth who have just graduated, or who are still in the school are dropping out, or after they graduate, they just are appearing in various agents like IELTS and TOEFL and trying to be out of the country. And these things really concerns me.
Yeah, so I actually want to ask you about that because yesterday also you brought this up in our meeting. So I can't quite remember how you put it. I think you said you were amazed or maybe appalled by the number of young people who are going to sit this international English language test in your college. At that time, it was being hosted in your college, it seems. Now, as young people like yourself finish education, enter the job market, or join the society to be productive adult citizens, you then see lots of these people moving out, seeking better opportunities. And it almost seems to us that there aren't good opportunities around in the country to keep you meaningfully engaged here. So has the previous generation let you down that when you finish your education, you have to now face this challenge of finding an opportunity abroad? How do you see this? I'm sure. What is your plan? Are you going to do IELTS and move out as well, or are there friends of yours who are planning to do that?
Well, on this topic, I am pretty much optimistic, and as one of our, as I was listening to one of the talks by Kishore Mahbubani, he had stated in Rick's talk that Asia today has the largest number of optimistic youth, and I think I am one amongst those who are optimistic being in our country and trying to develop it. And I'm pretty much sure about what the visionary king, His Majesty, had stated in one of his speeches that in Bhutan, the only resource that we have is the human resource, and youth of today are the human resource of our next generation. And His Majesty also pointed out that Bhutan today has larger opportunities compared to the citizens of the country in the past. And talking about what Sir mentioned about whether I'm trying to be do like my friends who just did their IELTS and are trying to go out or not. So on this issue, as I also mentioned yesterday, that I was going through one news in the council, and I found out that as soon as the lockdown or the international borders were opened, there were a queue of around 2,000 individuals who were competing for 800 slots to be sitting for IELTS and going out of the country. I am quite optimistic on this note also, because it's not just my subjective perspective that's going to count, but if I be objective on this note, I want to quote out what Kishore Mahbubani also stated in his speech about Rajiv Gandhi, saying that better brain drain than a brain in a drain. So the youth of Bhutan, with who are well qualified, if they go abroad, and once they come in the country, if they are able to contribute to the economy of a country, I think that's something positive to take up.
Yes, I'm totally with you. I think we should not totally dismiss or consider it wrong to go out, because I think living abroad, like I have done that myself, it gives you a very different new perspective to look at your own country and contribute much more effectively. I'll go in reverse order. Yeshey, you have been involved in so many of the public projects when you were working for the government, and then you've been following all these projects from hydro to tourism to conservation, and have been quite vocal also about these things. So if you had to look back at all these projects and issues that you have dealt with, and look at Bhutan's process of transformation, what would be one or two great successes, and how did we manage to achieve those successes? What would be the failures that we should avoid? Can you share your experience on this?
To me, there has been a whole lot of mistakes in the country. I'm very blunt about this, and I have been always blunt on the issue. But something that really sort of encouraged me is the recent water projects done by His Majesty. Bhutan is supposed to be it's supposed to be the biggest water resource country, but we have been suffering from water shortages. I mean, and I'm really encouraged by this water project because now water is reaching to people. I mean, I have done a book for the AGB, for the NEC, where we claim that we are the largest water resource people, but we have such a terrible problem with water. But now that's improving. And the other thing which I have always said in my blogs is that, look, for a country our size, our human resource, of our capital resource, I said big things are a little difficult for us to achieve. But you don't have to achieve big things by doing big things. You can achieve big things by doing many small things. And even better, dismantling those bad things that is causing stunting of the development. So these things are, I think, now actually coming to play. I mean, frankly speaking, the initiatives that have been put in place in recent times is, like I said earlier, it's rather too dramatic, too harsh, too hard. But I think there is some school of thought that says that that is necessary. That's the only way to go.
But you just mentioned some big projects that are stunting our growth. Can you be more specific? Are there some examples of big projects that we had pursued which didn't really go well, and what can we learn from these experiences?
See, the biggest, of course, my biggest number of blogs on the issue of the problem that we face is the hydropower. I think I have about nearly 70 articles on hydropower. And let me be very clear on this, is that I am not against hydropower. People think that I am against hydropower. That is not true. That's far from true. I'm not against hydropower. I am against the way it is done. Yesterday only, Dr. Karma and we were having a small talk, and there I said the same thing. Look, the location of hydropower is all wrong. The funding model is all wrong. The interest is all wrong. The government of India has borrowed 880 billion from Japan to do their bullet train, and the interest they pay is 0.01%. Bhutan pays 10% on our share of the hydropower projects. Now this is ridiculous. There's no such interest anywhere in the world, and I've been making noise on this. So how is this possible? People keep telling me that don't worry about this, because the project will take care of it. I don't believe that, basically because it's not true. I mean, people are just telling you because you just don't make noise about it. It's not true. The cost is being borne by the Buddhist people, although they say the project will take on the cost.
Indeed, we have been reading a few days ago in the national newspaper about how Punachangchu 2 is now again being delayed. So I think deferred for the third or fourth time. And Punachangchu 1 again has to shift from having a dam to barrage. So you have been studying all this. What are the prospects of these two mega projects? 2014,
I have been making noise to shut this dam projects down, frankly speaking, because they have been put in a place where the geological make of the place is very, very hazardous. They are located in very unsafe places. And I have been proven right because now the Punachangchu 1's dam, they have scrapped it. And they want to do barrage. Now, my question is still, how can a project that requires a 130 or feet high dam can be run by a barrage? And to me, it seems like that project is not going to happen. Because I don't think the barrage will work. I mean, there are so many turbines to run. A barrage cannot run those turbines. I don't think so. So I think it's on its way to. I don't think it's going to happen. And I hope it doesn't happen because there are other issues that is a dangerous thing to put. Now, the other thing which I told, I was invited to be part of the WHO's meeting 5 days in Paro, and there are a whole lot of young journalists also gathered. So I told the young guys this. I said, look, there's one thing that I have to tell you is that there is this thing that the famous white-bellied heron habitat is being impacted, and that's why the heron population has gone down from 36 a few years back to 31 this year. But what is being put out is that only the habitat of the heron is being impacted, which is totally wrong. That is not true. What is being impacted is the habitat of the other predators. Heron itself is a predator, of course, but there are other predators whose habitats are also impacted. So what's happening is the predators who have lost their food is now preying on new food, which is the white-bellied heron. That's why, although every year there are many eggs being laid, there is no improvement in the population of the white-bellied heron. So there are so many other things. I mean, there are a whole lot of things. Now the dam, at least they have said they will not stop. So I'm happy that that has happened, and hopefully in the next 1 year at the latest, that they will totally scrap the Sanchogan. Two might happen. I'm not very sure, but even there, I think, like Dr. said, the consultants reported some problems.
We hope there will be discussions like this where there can be voices from both sides to argue and help the citizens understand these issues. Peg, you have always been working through BCMD and other channels also to educate the citizens, to build awareness among the citizens. And a lot of our issues are very complex, and you can't have a very simple siloed approach. There's no simple solution. So when you look at the whole development process and the complexity is involved, is our society able to understand it, and are we addressing it the right way? Is there some problem in the way we address these issues as well?
Are we addressing it in the right way? I kind of feel like most people are aware that things are changing rapidly. I think there is a big gap in the sense that till very recently, the government had a tendency, to drive that change. The government has always been the implementer, right? Steering change. And for citizens to be much more articulate about change, the model has been sort of caught in the very old model where they're invited to Zombies, they sit, and then, they're there to implement a particular project. But thinking beyond that particular government project with fund is something that is not really done enough of. People need to learn to understand more about their own community, about their village, about, what the aspirations are of their children. Why are they gongtongs? What can we do about it? But there is still, although we've had 3 governments in 3 general elections, perhaps it's also our education system that teaches us to rely on government.
Yeah.
So I feel that a lot more can be done to make sure that the average person learns how to think, explore, investigate, question, critique, critical thinking, and also to be able to have the courage to also speak up. I think now there is a big change. I see it. In the old days, the governors, the Zongdas, were very, very powerful people. And I'm not criticizing them in that sense. I mean, there was a different pattern. They came with an agenda, they have a budget, they're going to do this, and people just followed. But times have changed so much that without bringing people in, it's quite difficult. Governments alone can't do it. Civil society is struggling. They're trying very hard. There's some very, very good civil society organizations trying to push for change, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's, philanthropy, whether it's, civic education. But, it's just starting. And I think we need to do so much more in terms of citizen education.
So we certainly need to look at issues from so many different angles, I think, from above, from below, from maybe also using external perspectives. And this is where I actually want to ask you for your, because of your personal background, we hear quite a lot about Singaporean help, both in reforming the civil service, also in helping transform the higher education system here. You come with such an intimate knowledge of both Singapore and Bhutan. So let me put it this way. If we are to look up to Singapore or get advices from Singapore, I'm sure there's so many things we can learn. If you can share maybe 1 or 2 things that Singapore, it would be worth for Bhutan to emulate Singapore. But also, is there anything that we should avoid learning from Singapore?
I had a bit of a smile to my face when Karma suggested asking that. But for many years now, I've always said, there's a lot of similarities. Bhutan and Singapore are both small. They live in a great, large neighborhood, right? Bhutan is landlocked. Singapore is a tiny little island. But the similarity is that both countries are countries that dared to be different. The early leadership in Singapore made some relatively tough decisions and were criticized by the West, the free Western press, which didn't quite understand a culture that's made up of diverse populations. But having said that, I think I also always said we should just learn what's good, because there are many things about Singapore that just cannot be translated. Just like we cannot translate. I see a lot of people now. Early days, Bhutanese compared ourselves with people in Delhi or Calcutta. Lately, it's been Bangkok. Bangkok has become our model. Singapore is not a great model, but there are many good things about it. So a few things I tried to think over the years. I've worked with in communications for the Ministry of Works and Human Settlements, and I used to tell them, why can't Bhutan do more about home ownership, especially in urban towns? So we don't turn every farmer and every one into a property owner. Home ownership. There are many great examples in Singapore where there's 80% home ownership. Whereas here, many of my friends are now retiring, and some of them are saying, we're going to move south, we're going to go to Gelifu, can't afford to be here in Thimphu because we didn't think about it. We've had government housing, right? Or whatever it is. So that is one. The other one is urbanization, bringing the environment into the city. Now, I see the way Thimphu is growing, and sometimes I'm in despair. I kind of wish, whenever there's a new road, I just drove to Paro, not a tree, not a plant on the main street. Singapore is very good at bringing the green and the park and the species and the trees into the city. That too, we can do it. We're so small, it's doable. And they have a lot of good people. We have such amazing people living in Thimphu. The best educated, the business, you name it, young people, our parliamentarians. The entire government lives here in the capital. And I don't see why we can't bring everyone on board to create that town. And I think Singapore has modeled that. Then the other one, what was it now? IT, yes. IT in governance, though. I think Singapore's IT governance is something we can emulate. Very quick turnarounds, applying for business licenses, making appointments for health checkups online, so we all don't have to physically queue and still don't understand things. So these are some of the good things, okay? But on the other hand, what can we avoid? I kind of feel like in Singapore, the pace of life has become so fast. It's so competitive. There's a lot of stress for students, young children. They all have to do well from, the moment you're born, you're like pushed to study and, etc. I kind of feel like in a country like Bhutan, we have so much discussion about wisdom and compassion. We must not forget to integrate that into our own system. We don't have to be competitive and become like Singapore. The other one is Singapore, for some reason, in the early years, I think the government was very pro-social, but lately, there's also a lot of critique there. Capitalism has totally taken over. It's all about GDP. It's all about how much you make, right? Everywhere you go, it's emulating sort of very liberal economies. And I don't think we can be a liberal economy in Bhutan with the kind of background that we have. So those are some of the things that is strong.
That's tricky, isn't it? That we want to have growth, but at the same time, we don't want that very competitive, hardworking culture. It's almost like asking to eat the cake and also have it. There's probably a fine balance, of course. I was reading your article on Singapore, which was published in Druk Journal. And you were arguing about how Singapore in the later part of the 20th century was arguing for a nationalist identity. And it was driven by trying to unite the different racial and ethnic groups. Now, maybe that was appropriate, and that's what helped Singapore drive its economy. But then 21st century Bhutan may be a very different situation. So how would you, for instance, just as I brought up, we have the cultural identity that talks a lot about contentment and well-being and happiness. And at the same time, to have something that is quite driven towards an economic development. I can't easily see these two getting married well.
This is something that's, sometimes I have a lot of discussions with my husband, with friends. I think it can work, but we're looking at very liberal economic models. And we tend to we think that to do well, you have to be like Singapore City, Bangkok City. No, we haven't given enough weightage or attention to grooming our communities. How about cooperatives, community groups? There's so many possibilities. Right now, we privatize everything as if it's the only model, right? Bottling water, privatize. Well, how about trying, like in Gaza, the community learning to bottle their own water, have a say, have a stake, earn some of the profits? I kind of feel that we are forgetting the co-ops, the community business groups, the community self-help groups. Maybe this is what Yeshey is saying. There's no link at the past. I kind of feel like they're leaving the rural areas as if, we haven't changed in so many years. That they could change. Our young people can find so many opportunities there if only we would try. But I think maybe because capitalism is major, is on every channel that we look at, is on every newspaper article, we need to tell more about our own stories. And I'm afraid sometimes this is where our press, our news media, could do much more. Democracy is also not just about venting and complaining. It's also about constructive stuff, and talking about who's tried to do what, who's a role model in which community, how have they built that stupa, how have they kept themselves afloat. I think we're not giving enough attention to that. But if we did, there's so much possibilities.
We deliberately chose to keep the title of this session, How Can We Help Transformation? It's not only just about talking about transformation. I don't quite agree that, I think a lot of people in the private sector may have a different take on what you just said, that there's too much of privatization going. I think their complaint is normally that the public sector, the state enterprises are taking over most of the viable business opportunities. So with regard to that, I want to come back to Yeshey. You have been following a lot of these issues. And when you look at Bhutan, I think next year we are graduating from least developed countries group to a middle income country group. A lot of this preferential treatment we get probably will be removed. So are we prepared? How are we going to sort of come back from the economic decline we saw because of the COVID pandemic? Are there any low-hanging fruits that we should now go for? I mean, of course, the state leaders would be all thinking about this, but what would be your perspective? I think we need more ideas.
Now, it's a very complex issue actually, and I'm not very sure that I'm competent to handle this. But I think at the root of all this is basically the insatiable greed that we succumb to. And I keep telling friends that, look, remember one thing, that a livelihood is no good if you don't have a life. People keep telling me livelihood. I said, what the hell is the point of livelihood when you don't have a life? Similarly, I keep saying the same thing. I said, look, you have to contain your greed, because at the root of everything is greed. And I said, look, remember one thing, is that I make the money, not the money make me. Therefore, I am the master of the money, and I cannot be its servant. Don't allow yourself to be the servant of money. There are so many issues, like, for instance, Bhutan. I've been in the system from 1971. I've been heading the export division of the country. Those days, we used to export millions of dollars worth of goods. Today, no. Agriculture production? No. Chilies, the one food that we eat, morning, breakfast, lunch, snacks, everything is chilies, and we can't produce chilies also. PDP government wanted to bring it by bouquet, if you remember. So this is the kind of thing. So today, I think Doctor addressed that question once. I don't think we answered it. Is that I think Bhutan has good scope for agriculture. We have neglected it so badly. Forestry, you know, in 1979, I was one of the persons involved in the nationalization of timber, and we totally banned the harvesting of the forest. And today, our forest is suffering, and we are suffering. As of last year, apparently, we imported 3 billion meters worth of wood for a country that prides itself as a country that has 75% of our forest cover. Now, this is ridiculous. Why can't we change? I mean, for us, the thing is like in 1979 when I was handed off to Samdongar by university, I fought the fingernail. I said, why do you want to send me? I said, I'm a grade 1 officer. You send me to Samdongar, you have to give me a car, a house, an office, a peon, a driver, and I don't know what. I said, there is no economic benefit to that. I'm a burden to the country. So I think sometimes also, you know, thinking. I think we don't think properly, frankly speaking. You know, I have always said this, that we are poor thinkers. I mean, why can't we do agriculture? My goodness. I mean, you know, but the problem is the government is not doing a good job. The agriculture ministry is not doing a good job. The department is not doing a good job. They are saying 2030 we will have what is that? Organic, 100% organic. And the department ministry is struggling hard to supply fertilizers, chemicals, goodness. I mean, so the thing is, the whole thinking is so disorganized. So I think we need to improve that. I think we need to channel our thoughts properly. And I think one of the biggest transformation that's happening, I think we need in that area.
So more thinking and discussions. Yeah, you know, you are a bright young person, so I hope your generation will think more. But then when you think about the country's situation, just this morning in Queensland, we are reading about how the foreign reserve has come down. The rupee reserve has come down by 50% or so. The convertible currency reserve has come down by about 25%. And then we have a big debt, I think about 150% of GDP or something like that. Do you worry? Because that debt is going to be passed on to your shoulders, right? So you and your generation, what is your take on these issues when they come up? I hope you read Queensland or other newspapers and keep up to date with these figures and news. So what's your take?
I think my senior generation, my senior citizens have put us in a big thick soup now. Okay. In this changing paradigm, it's really something that I want to speak about. Bhutan is mentioned by our two great personalities out here, whom I look upon. They mentioned about Bhutan developing or graduating from this developed country to a developed nation. And also we know that once Bhutan is fully developed, the foreign aids that we are currently receiving, it's going to be cut off. And then Bhutan has to sustain on its own economy. And Bhutan has been, our system of government, we have been talking about self-reliance since, I think, the time of Third Gyalpo. And it still is something that we need to question on. So the system in the country has to do some good designing on what our ideas are to in the framework of our modern development. So we have a lot of ideas to anticipate from the developed nations. Okay, we can consider that Bhutan is developing at a very rapid rate. But one thing that we need to, I feel we need to bear in mind is not to commit the same mistake that the developed nation has committed in the field of development. So let me also not forget talking about the global governance and the ideas to anticipate from there. when I talk about global governance, in any of the companies all over the world, or in talking about Asia, the form of the hierarchy is such that anything that comes is from top down, and the people who are at the lower level, they are just the ones who are suffering, and that's the same thing that's happening in Bhutan. Sharing about one joke, maybe. So let's say that there are elephants who are angry and are fighting on a field. The some thing that will be hampered is the grass. Elephants are happy and they are making love. The ones who are gonna be hampered is the grass. This is what Kishore Mahbubani has stated, and I think that really counts in a small economy like Bhutan. So, anything that happens in Bhutan is directly inclined to, is frank to state out here, because anything that happens in Bhutan is inclined towards India. For instance, we saw in our newspaper a few days ago that with the crisis of Russia-Ukraine war or invasion, whatever we want to call it, so there won't be effect on the fuel in our country, but that really had effect. So a small economy like ours really have impact when the bigger nations are having this crisis. So I think there is a lot to discuss when we want to develop our country.
Yes, thank you. So yes, indeed, we need to think about issues on a global level and also national level and perhaps at a local level. When you had your college education and also school education before that, do you feel that you had enough platforms and avenues where you could discuss these things, where young people like yourselves had enough exposure? In other words, this is my last round of questions for three of you. Is there enough public discourse on these issues happening? Like in your college, are you happy with what opportunities your college provided?
Well, I think this is something indeed a thought-provoking question that I, as a youth who recently graduated, once I talk about it, I think there are lots. I think on Facebook, our friends are watching, and then still there are many who take these words that I say and try to. I hope that they would implement in various platforms or various organizations, such as schools and college or institutions. So this gives me a chance to be someone who is speaking on behalf of our youth in the country. So I got a lot of opportunities to be part of such discussion. I myself, one thing is, I strongly believe in what His Majesty says: people's participation in any discourse. And in nation building particularly, I think it is very important for our younger generation to be part of it. And our parents some of our parents might be forgetting when they go to some meeting or anything. Once they are back, they do not talk what they discussed in the meeting or at the local government level to their children. Even if our young children who are interested to ask them, there might be some of our parents who just neglect them, saying it's not your age where you talk about it. So me as a student leader, I got ample of opportunities. I myself, as of now, I'm heading as country ambassador as well as vice chairperson in G17 US Bhutan, where we have around 93 youth students from 4 colleges. So such platforms in the country, when it is given from a young age, I think it's going to be something that is going to help our youth development.
That's wonderful. Well, congratulations on winning all those opportunities for yourself. And I hope even an average young Bhutanese gets to avail these opportunities, find space to discuss and share their thoughts. the two senior panelists. So, I mean, not in terms of age,
Two other
senior
young.
in terms of the other young is the new young. I want you to pass a rather sort of objective, fair assessment of the public discourse situation in Bhutan, and particularly tell us honestly, has Bhutan dialogues been of any use, of benefit to nation building? What can we do to make it better, to make it more relevant?
I think there's so much opportunity now to share voice with social media. I think our challenge is how to get up above the noise and to really have meaningful conversations. That's missing. And we tend to think that freedom means venting and, I watched once Prime Minister speaking to various groups about the COVID situation and the kind of stuff non-stop, but half of it was just vent. So, we should learn we need to learn how to be more constructive in our conversation, right? How to critique, provide the solutions so that, it's not just noise. The whole world is full of noise. And that's why we look at US and we can see that issue, that problem everywhere. The other one is not just about constructive conversation. I feel that conversations like these, including dialogues, must also lead to some kind of change in mindset and action. Because we're an oral society in Bhutan, so talk is very easy. The WeChat, I just noticed my family members on WeChat groups, everybody chats. But how do we shift that thinking? And how do we take it to the next level? That still remains, a difficulty. Perhaps we also need to do a lot more conversations in Dzongkha, Bhutan dialogue. Not just, because I think among the English speaking, from the time we started the journal in 2015, and, we have quite a few now, but Dzongkha speakers might need Shachop speakers, but Dzongkha, I don't know. Maybe that's the way. Media needs to come in a big way. And this is where I feel our public discourse, we need to invest more in creating our own media. I remember supporting a lot of BCMD. We did creative nonfiction writing. We've done, media production. The whole purpose is so that we gain some confidence in telling our own stories. 10, 12, 15 years ago, especially my women friends, they'll say, is this a story? Should I? I say, yeah, we should. We should have more female voices. Women all hesitate. Nobody wants, but now, I think digital media gives us a lot of opportunity, but we want quality. Of course, the rest we can still banter. You want to banter, we can banter, but that's a different channel. You want to contribute to the country's change, let's get more serious. Let's be more constructive. And then the last thing I want to say is the vision. We do need, especially the media needs to awaken us, to enable us to see. And the government and the state needs to articulate that vision in a very simple, clear manner so that myself, my children, all of us, our friends, understand where we are going to be at 2035. How are we going to get there? What can we do? So I think that is where sometimes the media too, needs to rise above the noise and try and really pin down what's most important.
Plus, I think it's public knowledge that I participate very actively on the governance issues. And the thing is, the last time also, I come back to the WHO conference in Paro. They were all media people. So I said, look, this country has never been about being fearful of telling the truth. When NBC South Asia from Delhi came to interview me, I told the same thing. She said, Yeshey, how can you be so vocal? I said, look, this is not Korea, this is Bhutan. In Bhutan, we don't have problem with the truth. We can handle it. But the thing is, not many people make noise. And I keep telling a lot of friends that, look, the government is only one spoke in the wheel. The government doesn't make Bhutan. People like us make the Bhutan. And if we see some problem, we have to come out and yell about it. Of course, there are certain truths we really can't put it out in the public domain. That you have to be wise enough to understand. And it's not important to put out useless and destructive truth. But As long as it's a useful truth, I think we should speak up. And I encourage everybody to speak up because some of us see things from a very different perspective. It's not necessarily that the government is all the time right. We can also offer something much more constructive than they can, because we have also been in the system for so long. We have institutional memory guiding us in our judgment. So I think the public participation is important.
That's all. Thank you. So with that, let's open to questions from the audience. We'll sort of push it to 5:15 or so to wrap up the session. So if anyone has questions from here or online.
Our first question is, how can we increase public discourse and media involvement in public discourse?
Would you like to take that, Pek or Yeshey?
I think that's very simple. No, like I said, participate in it. Just by sitting quietly, you won't help. Participate in it.
And a follow-up question now. Are citizens fit to participate in public discourse if they might be politically ignorant? How can we address this issue?
I guess maybe one way is to perhaps set some boundaries. I think in the early years of BCMD, we even tried something called Bhutan Speaks. We did it online, and we had, we set the boundaries. We say, you can be critical, but please don't attack people, right? You can, please offer solutions and not just complain, right? Sort of mutual respect, if you set those boundaries, and then if you lay out the fact that to be political, being political is important. Everything is about politics after all, whether or not I buy local veggies or buy imported junk food. A decision is made, it's a political decision. So I think the more we provide these guidance and parameters and make a safe space where people feel like they're not going to be hauled up. I think right now there's so much, in the press. I have a lot of friends in the newspapers, and they say nobody wants to talk, and there's a level of mistrust. And they said, no, we're going to push back. And I said, no, have you ever tried going to the authorities and saying, hey, I'm from the press, I'm from the newspapers, this is what we really want to do. We want to raise the level of public discourse. We're not here to, we will be critical, but that's our role. You have a role to get feedback. Can we help each other out where possible? It doesn't mean we have to be best friends, but I respect what you do in government, and please respect our attempts to provide space for public discussion. Right? So I think some guidance is also needed, and we do it, I think, in Bhutan.
Yeah, there's also sometimes a widespread misunderstanding of being political and taking up party politics. These are two different issues, and I think a lot of people mix these two up and think that we are taking part in some kind of partisan politics. I think as social political animals ourselves, we have to be involved in it if we are committed to nation building. And as again, there is a widespread assumption that people are not allowed to say certain things, speak about certain topics or write. And these are, I think, mostly assumptions. We haven't even tried. If we do it, most likely no one is going to object. So we really need to sort of create this space inch by inch and groom people. I suppose a lot of Bhutanese are intellectually still not ready to take part in these kind of things. I myself, and I don't consider myself fully proficient in this, but Bhutan Dialogues is my classroom. I learn by doing it every session. And I think this is how we have to grow, step by step.
The last thing is that we can do so much in the classroom, I feel. More like in school. That's where we begin, with the little ones. Give them more time to ask questions and to investigate instead of the other way. And in the family. Sometimes we're so busy in the family, we don't even spend time with our kids. Everybody's on our own screen. But if we can really talk about what is the transformations taking place, what's causing our anxiety, what's giving us hope. I think those are great conversations to have. Not easy, but I think it's important. And if you have the whole nation talking, then it's getting us somewhere, right? But if you're just totally entertained out, and sometimes, I must say in the media, you turn on this non-stop entertainment, then it also lulls us into the state of not looking at issues that matter.
Thank you for that suggestion. I think we are this year trying, that's Lopen Foundation, trying a what we call the Student Bodhisattva project in schools, where we want to make students discuss local problems and then also deliberate on what solutions they can find and compete for a fund to bring about such solutions. Do you want to add anything, please?
I just wanted to add on what our two personalities out here shared to answer what our friends who are watching us live had questioned us. So, as Mampek was mentioning about having something like local product, water bottles or packing water bottles at Casa and focusing on our economy, like agriculture that Yeshey sir mentioned, which we term it as our backbone of our nation. But if we neglect it, then I think there is we are going to fail deliberately. And Bek was mentioning about private sector taking up, taking over government. Some of us we have studied that government sector is not giving enough opportunity to our private sector and private firms. So keeping that blame game aside, as the Bhutanese economy which is growing, I mentioned that we have ideas to anticipate. So I termed it as pragmatism. For Bhutan, or a small economy that is growing and slowly going to graduate from least developed countries to a developing country. So it doesn't matter whether for a country like Bhutan, the cat is black or white, as long as it catches the rat. So let us try the various possible ways in a way that the economy of our country becomes self-reliant.
Well, Peck earlier was saying we should make sure what the cat is like before we adopt a cat. But thank you, wonderful analogy. I want to throw my last round of questions to you. I'll start with Yeshey. So you have been a photographer, a world-class photographer. It's such a wonderful range of photographs of nature and birds. Which one do you cherish the most and why? And when you get out when you go on with such hobbies, you have such stamina to go on even at your sort of level. I won't say age, but what keeps you going? Can you share what really makes you agile and effective?
I think that answer is very simple. I've been blessed with good health. And for the last 40 years, I have not seen inside of a hospital. The only time I got sick was in Calcutta when I overdrank and I got liver issue. What is that?
Liver cirrhosis.
No. What is it? Eyes turn yellow.
Jaundice.
So that was the first and last time I ever visited a hospital. That was probably in 1984. No, earlier than that. This is the now. The photography has been an accidental profession for me. What happened was, I have a friend who is a doctor in America. She was coming to Bhutan, so I told her, please buy me a camera. So I gave her the model, the make, everything. But she was totally, absolutely out of control. And she bought me a huge digital camera, which I didn't want. But she said, you don't have to pay for it, it's my gift to you. And then I took the camera for a test ride. And then it so happened that it was spring. And I captured a bird, which is called the plumbeous water-red star. And the bird was a sheep. And she had just delivered babies and she was feeding the babies. Apparently, I think she had more than 1 or 2 babies because she's become so scrawny, working so hard to feed the family. So the image was stunning. So I put the image on one of the professional photographic sites and it hit the roof. So since then I became, so my first bird is my most favorite. Second one is of course the famous white-bellied heron, which is which I mentioned to you earlier. I was doing a book for the Wangshu dynasty's celebration, and I was commissioned to do a book on the birds of Bhutan. And it took me 5 years to get that image. of the bird. I mean, probably today I have the best image in the whole world, and it is now gone into Guinness Book of World Records. It's also being archived in London in a place called Archive. So that is my second. But I still am saddened because that original bird image of the mother plump is what I did Head Start. I have lost it. I can't find it anywhere. And I'm still looking. I've got about 40,000 images. It takes time, but I'm still looking, and I'm hopeful that I'll probably get that image. But that is the one who set me off. And since then, I've done pretty well as a photographer. I have assignments from abroad to cover Wimbledon and Shanghai Masters and all that. So the journey has been good. It's been very fulfilling. And of course, like you know, it's a very hard work, because I am a very traditional photographer. I don't depend on technology to deliver my images to me. I work to get my own image.
Yes, thank you for that wonderful personal story. Peg, I know you are a practicing Buddhist. Talk about citizen empowerment. We have to empower ourselves. Transformation has to help from within. I don't know what you do to keep yourself sharp and agile, effective. If there's anything you want to share.
Sharp, agile, and effective. I'm not sure I'm any of them, but I must say, you know, perhaps it's the whole being in Bhutan situation. Every day is a change. Every moment is a change. Everything is different. And I must say, maybe because I started life as a reporter and a journalist, and I came to Bhutan, I was also in the media. It kept me asking the questions. It kept me looking for answers. It kept me asking people about things. And I must say, Yeshey, early days, I had a lot. I'm clearing stuff from analog, VHS to slides. You take a lot of photos. And I remember one of the first short documentaries I tried to do. I was so presumptuous. I was working with my friend, the cameraman, and I said, Poudel, just run the camera, just in case the guy's a bit shy, we'll just run with it, right? But the farmer had no problem at all, camera or no camera. You see, the confidence of the people, there's, the courage, the confidence, even the camera pointing at them. I've learned so much just by talking to people. And I've had also the good fortune to work in civil society, work in a journal that continues to seek answers. But, just by asking questions, just by investigating, just by having an interest in an amazing society that dares to be so different. The first thing that blew my mind away was GNH over GDP. It's people over business and money. I mean, I'm not against private sector. I think private sector is also very, very important. But to say well-being and all the many seminars and discussions we've had about putting people at the forefront, and the skillful means that the state has undertaken to preserve our culture, right, in a small landlocked country in the region where 2/5 of mankind live. I mean, we could have been swamped easily, but so maybe all this.
So finally, our youngest panelist, final word for you. What did you enjoy most to build your capacity in your education days? And is there anything that you would have liked to have that would have really sort of changed the trajectory of your life? Something that educational institutions today don't provide and future students could do better with it?
With the initiative of what I'm going to point out by His Majesty, I think I want to go back to that state and start afresh. And I think most of us would say the same thing. So the concept of the visionary king have started BB Bhutan Pek-Dorji. So this concept is very much new and going to be very much profound. So I foregrounded this concept before I start what I want to really, what I missed in my schooling. So education system in Bhutan has groomed me with 21st century digital skills, such as transferable skills or communication skills and teamwork and all. I know about those things. Job specific skills. I took mass communication as my major in at college, and it taught me concepts like public relation, handling press release, handling equipments like photographic camera and videographic camera and all. But I still feel there is a need for me to learn various have digital skills, such as when I took economics in my class 11 at high school. I missed taking IT. Well, if I had to take IT, I would be missing the economics part. So I was lacking IT that point. And I also want to learn various. We as a students who in Bhutan in the present time, I think we need to know about codings. I took course era at college and then just did the basics of Python coding. So Python was something very new to me. And in Bhutan today, our young primary level kids, they have under the vision of His Majesty, they could know about Code Monkey. And I think such initiatives is slowly making Bhutan, transforming Bhutan. So my generation, although I have a lot of experience or not lot of experience, but I learned quite good concept, but I still missed a lot of part of what my education in Bhutan could have provided way before.
No, thank you very much. So as we conclude the 50th session of Bhutan Dialogues, I hope this platform, which we created as a modest contribution to Bhutan's process of transformation, has been of some use. I mean, we at least wish that there be a platform for civil conversations where we can practice critical thinking, mindful listening, and right speech, as we often put it. After 50 sessions, I personally have learned quite a lot from the very learned expert guests that I've had. It was a privilege to talk to all my guests, and such great honor to have three of you. I always wrap up this session with a Bhutanese piece of wisdom. And as we're talking about public discourse, my choice today is Lam Zewa Nimi Hapshi, Ju Zewa Kebi Kunju. A wrong direction may mess up a day's plan. A wrong deliberation could turn things upside down for an aeon. So with that proverb underscoring the importance of discussion and deliberations to reach a decision, I end the session, and thank you all three for joining me for this session. Thank you, audience, for joining us. Thanks everybody who is also joining us online.